but she has just come back from a mission to Israel that she would like to share. It was a women's group that went to Israel on a whirlwind. I think it was all of 4 days long, and whirlwind trip in order to, well, she'll tell you why, in order to, and she happens to be our daughter.
So first of all, thank you for this opportunity to share. I think it's so important that people back home get a sense of what things are going on in Israel. And the fact that you're doing this Eye on Israel program and you're allowing your viewers a window into what life on the ground is like. And it's so important because people in Israel right now, really more than anything, just need us to give them a hug, even if it's a virtual hug, from overseas. They just really need to feel that they're not alone. Called the Miami Women's Chesed Mission. And it was attached to one of the synagogues here in South Florida. And it was a group of 30 women. Our mission was really about supporting the families of those left behind, meaning the twofold. There's the families of the soldiers who were called up, very rushed with no notice, and had to pick up and leave their families. And then there's the families who were from victims of terror. So I'll give you an example. And so all those little communities, many of which were attacked on October 7th, had to be evacuated and were moved into various hotels and communities within the rest of the country. So we were asked to pack bags for those families. We brought toys for the children, just because these are people who at this point have been living out of suitcases for 4 months. Many of them will never be able to go back to their homes. So if you could just imagine the emotional, turmoil of having to still wake up every day, take care of your children while you're in this temporary hotel setting, while you're worrying about your husband who's in Gaza, who you haven't heard from in over 130 days, I believe, at the time of our mission. I think that was the common thread that kept being discussed during the 4 days of our mission, that we really almost felt traumatized by what we were exposed to, because we all come from these comfortable American sheltered lives. And the devastation that we saw that was brought into these people's lives, not just on October 7th.
So do you want to talk about what do you want to share about the history in 30 seconds?
So in 30 seconds, what I want to share is that, unfortunately, to many people, October 7th was their first experience hearing about Israel being attacked by its enemies and by its, bordering peoples. But the truth is that really, since the founding of the state of Israel,
in other words, it actually, the attacks, there are always been Jews living in the land of Israel, and the attacks have been throughout history.
But it was shocking because the people in the South were especially friendly towards the Arabs in Gaza. This is something that maybe not everybody's aware of. People like to act like, Gaza had no back and forth between Israel. But in fact, I remember during the 2 years that I lived in Israel, speaking to many people who lived in Gaza, who were Palestinians, who actually came into Israel to work in the various hotels or the various farms because the wages were so much higher, and also the work environment was so much more pleasant. So it was something that was very common that people went back and forth. And this was such a shock to on October 7th, because unfortunately, many of these people, it turned out, were the ones who supplied Hamas with information about where, how to break into these communities. There was actually a very well planned out attack where they knew exactly where the head of all the security forces are. And these, terrorists came in with real military equipment. They were very, very well equipped. So the terrorists knew where the commanders were. In every community that they entered, they went straight to the commanders' homes, and they took out all the security, the people who actually were in charge of defending their little kibbutzim, their little communities. And some of the people that we met with really still could not believe that people who they had, had opened their homes to, they had, had relationships with, had given the information over to Hamas, to terrorists. And that's why I think it's so complicated. People don't necessarily understand, even if these were maybe good people, Hamas operates in a way that if you don't give us the information that we want, we will kill you. We will kill your entire families. So it's almost like there's not anybody who really is not, there's nobody that's able to really stay out of this. That's the part that I think it's hard for us to understand in America, that it's just impossible. The Palestinian people, unfortunately, are in this position of just being pawns, really being pawns by the terrorist organization. So anyways, back to our mission. I think that was one of the things that struck us the most, is that as people were sharing with us their stories and, the heartbreak of what they experienced on October 7th. And, another thing that I think we did not understand until we got there is that it wasn't just a one-day rampage where Hamas terrorists, 2,000 terrorists poured across the border and started killing people. It actually, those 2,000 terrorists were in cities in Israel for over 3 days.
Rachelle, were you given any insight into why it seemed to take forever for the Israeli army to react and start doing stuff?
So what we're starting to understand a little bit, I think, from when you're actually there, is that a lot of the Israeli security along the Gaza border relies on technological oversight. And so I got the sense while we were there that an investigation is already ongoing, but that there was no question that their security was breached. So they did not get an understanding at all. And I'll give you a specific example of, Nahal Oz, which is one of the surveillance centers, which is right on the border. So they have a division of women. So women could choose to be a part of all women surveillance units, which they're nice because you don't see combat. You're in all women, you're surrounded by women. So many of these women are put in these positions where what they're doing is they're watching the footage of the border, but they're actually right by the border. So they also have where they're supposed to alert the soldiers. And I don't know if you've read about what happened at Nahal Oz. Do you know anything about what happened?
No,
So
Rachelle.
Terrorists came in, meaning the cameras didn't even show that there was any terrorists crossing over. The first indication they had that there was terrorists was when they poured into the base, and these religious girls locked themselves in the room with the computers where they were watching the computer screens, which still showed no indication that anything was going on. And unfortunately, the terrorists decided to get them out. They actually lit the whole building on fire. This is a very, very horrific situation where these girls all were burnt to death. 21 girls were burnt to death from religious homes. I mean, this was only a teeny part of our experience, and I really want to talk about